Hi, this is Vrinda, and I'm back again with another chat session with you. Often, we keep so busy that it's difficult to take time out to have to be able to do this. But there's a lot going on at the moment in terms of actual action that is happening along the borders and in cities along those borders. And there's also a lot of action that is happening in studios, in newsrooms, and in the world of information around us. At times, one can even feel overwhelmed and adverse, helpless in the face of such massive amounts of fake news and news that comes our way. It's very, very difficult to distinguish between what is real, what is happening actually, and what is just hearsay or or targetedly and uh, intentional fake news that is designed to provoke certain kinds of emotions. On the night of the 8th of May, uh, several drone attacks were reported along from the cities along India's western borders. Videos were circulating on our social media feeds and they were being aired live on newsrooms. And it was in the middle of this that a vicious cycle of fake news started building itself up. And in the span of a few hours, a lot of it had to be debunked, was debunked. But still, a lot of those ideas and those cycles of misinformation are still perpetuating. And it's not easy for the everyday viewer to be able to tell when the news channel that they've been watching for years has suddenly turned around and is peddling just blatant fake information. So fake, in fact, that the Ministry of Defense had to issue a public advisory, a tweet advising news channels and media outlets to be careful in their coverage of the events as they're progressing, to be careful of and sensitive and mindful of the ways in which they're reporting on this incident, and to not do live coverage of military movement. Things which are basic in our understanding of how journalistic coverage happens of an unfolding situation. This is something that India has had an experience in. There's the history of the Kargil wars. There's also the history of the Mumbai attacks, where journalistic reportage was live coverage of those events proved to be detrimental. So, in the middle of all of that, I have a few points and few observations to make that I felt that I should share here, because I mean, I can talk about myself. I deal with news and such claims every day on a daily basis for hours. And even for me, it was not an easy task last night on the 8th of May to figure out what is real and what is true. But and it's also important to highlight that in the middle of all of this, a lot of questions that are very instrumental and should sort of inform our basic understanding and our fundamental approach towards something like a war, those are missing. And so I'd like to begin with two quotes from a very old book, a book that is actually about the Vietnam War, the war that was fought between the US and Vietnam in the years between the decades of 1950 and 1970. So this is a book called The Sorrow of War. The cover you can see on the screen. So the author writes, Bao Nin, he writes, "The future lied to us there long ago in the past. There is no new life, no new era, nor is it hope for a beautiful future that now drives me on, but rather the opposite. The hope is contained in the beautiful pre-war past." So the idea is very simple, really, that once a war happens, be it the winning side or the losing side, there's not really a lot of hope that is left. Hope is only contained in the beautiful pre-war past. The time that is before war is the only time when you can have hope, right? But this is the time right now on our news channels, on national network media platforms, which are outrightly committing warmongering, which are encouraging people to to support war. These are channels that are not only doing so on the basis of actual events, but are actually pushing fake news and fake pieces of information to call for a war. So, to just cite a few examples, for example, last night it was being reported that Karachi has been taken over by the army, and there is a political upheaval that is going to take place in Pakistan, and the army general of Pakistan, Asim Munir, has fled the country, and that Shahbaz Sharif's BP is low. I mean, these are things that obviously nobody, no, news anchor from Noida Film City was going to go and check his BP, right? But these are ways in which a certain kind of war centered bravado is created, and people are encouraged to feel as if they have won something that has not even begun. And what is the point behind doing such an exercise? It's, after all, it boils down to TRPs. But then what is the cost? Think of the families who were living in these border cities last night. I personally come from a family that is largely scattered along these cities, and there was a lot of panic. Even in areas where the threat was not really that much, the panic created because of these news channels was very high. And these cities have a history of having lived next to a border that has been very sensitive. So they know that nothing good ever comes out of war, really. And if it is an inevitable possibility, then we'll come to that when it happens. But at this point, to make such fake claims serves nobody any purpose. At the same time, there were these groups of people who are part of the larger ecosystem of the ruling regime of the times. These are people that are either actively affiliated with the BJP, or they're part of this network of think tanks who go on air, who go on these news channels, who have their own special podcasts, who have their own channels. And they were actively calling for, who were not only actively spreading fake news, but were also calling for the banning and the boycott and the banishment of such people who were going out and correcting these fake claims. These are channels, these are individuals on, say, Twitter and all, who are actually supporting the spread of fake news, who are calling for an active investment in spreading fake propaganda. Compare this to how the government is responding at this point, how the army is responding. Their press notes and their press conferences are remarkable for their restraint, and they are not calling for war. The Indian ambassadors in different countries are actively saying that we are not at war, and that our sole war at this moment is against terrorism. But there are news anchors who are tweeting that the war has started. So you have these two very different economies of information. There are individuals who have been actively at this moment being targeted for speaking out against war. There are people who are being targeted just because they are calling out these channels, these Godi media news networks, for the fake news that they're propagating. There's Mohammed Zubair of the Alt News, who has done a phenomenal job of curbing such fake claims. There are journalists who've been going out of their way and publishing and correcting fake narratives, and their numbers have been released on social media. Arfa Khanam Sherwani, her number was released, her number and email were released on Twitter, and this is called doxing. So now she's being trolled massively through fake calls and fake messages. Then there were fake photos that were being tweeted by reputed journalists, and when they were called out on that, they simply took those posts down, but there is no apology of any kind for having spread that wrong information. There are news channels where senior anchors, while live on television, were just reading news pieces out of their phones, but when all of that turned out to be fake, the channel simply asked a young reporter to come out and issue an apology. the apology should be issued by the anchor who spread the fake news in the first place, right? So this is this complete abdication of any kind of responsibility and accountability towards the people who come to you, who come to these news channels with the hope and promise of truthful reporting. These are news networks that have hundreds of reporters on the ground, who have hundreds of sources, well placed sources in the government, in different networks and circles of information. There is no way in which individuals like you and me, I am myself a journalist, but even I can't count myself amongst them. There is no way in which we have the kind of access to information that these networks have. Yet they chose to publish fake news at an extremely sensitive time. When such events happen, any fake claim that begins its journey, it never really stops at any given point. It follows a long path, and it never ends in a way that can be called conducive to either peace or the truths of journalism. When we prepare our reports as independent journalists, we are extremely cautious. We ensure that not a single word is out of line. Still, errors can happen. Vijeta Singh, the deputy editor of The Hindu, published a report, and that report was taken down by the channel itself. But while it happened, during the time that it was happening, a vicious troll attack was launched against her, where she was called the enemy of the state. Calls were made for her arrest, and people were calling for her boycott. When the same question was posed to the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, he did not deny the claim. He just said that answers will be given at the appropriate time. So even though the government did not issue a denial of that report, a reporter was judged, was called out, and was boycotted in the ways that she was. And this happens when we are paying such attention to what we are saying. At the other hand, you have these channels and these WhatsApp groups that go out of their way and publish all kinds of propaganda. So it is a very difficult call to make for the average viewer to place their trust in something, but it'll always be rewarding to follow information that is verified, information that is authorized, that is coming from channels that are known for their fact checking. You could follow journalists like Muhammad Zubair. There is the independent news networks, News Laundry and News Minute, are going to launch a live series where they cover the events as they unfold. So you can actively make these choices to follow information that is not encouraging warmongering, that is not creating panic, and that is choosing to give you, even if it's limited, but is choosing to give you the right information because you deserve the truth. And with this is Vrinda signing off. I hope to see you soon again.